On a warm, rainy evening in July 2024, a man quietly walked out of a home on Ashland Close in the quiet town of Bushey, Hertfordshire. Hidden under a white sheet, he carried a crossbow. For the past 5 hours, he had been putting a deadly plan into action, one he had carefully prepared for weeks. His goal was to kill 3 women from the same family. As news of the brutal killings made headlines across the country, a wave of fear and sorrow swept through the public. While people mourned the victims, detectives began working to uncover the truth. Hi, I'm Kevin, and welcome to Just Thought Lounge. Today's story is one of the most widely known cases we've explored on this channel. You might already be familiar with this case, or maybe you've seen updates as officials have shared more over the past year. It's the kind of story that sticks with you, disturbing and hard to forget. For us at Just Thought Lounge, this one feels especially personal. Bushey, located in the eastern part of England, is a well-off commuter town about 16 miles from London. It's known for its peaceful atmosphere and the way it blends countryside charm with easy access to city life. At the heart of Bushey, there's a traditional pub and a quiet church green. Like many towns where tragic events later unfold, Bushey was the kind of place people thought was safe. The kind of place where something so violent just didn't happen. But that changed on the night of July 9th, 2024. At 6:58 p.m., 28-year-old Hannah Hunt dialed emergency services using her mother's phone. She was calling from the family home in Bushey, where she lived with her parents, Carol and John, and her 25-year-old sister, Louise. Hannah told the operator that an intruder was inside their house. "He shot us," Hannah told the dispatcher. Despite her serious injuries, she managed to give as much detail as she could. 12 minutes later, emergency crews arrived at the scene. Inside the house, they found 61-year-old Carol and her youngest daughter, Louise, already dead. Medics tried to save Hannah, but despite their efforts, she didn't survive either. The 2 sisters were killed by crossbow wounds, while their mother, Carol, had been stabbed. The only surviving family members were the father, John, and another daughter, Amy, both of whom weren't home when the attack happened. By the time police got there, the killer had already escaped. One officer warned, "Be careful going in. There could still be someone armed with a crossbow inside." We all went upstairs and kept peeking out the windows, just like many of the neighbors did. Everyone was trying to see what was going on. It turned into a bit of window watching. It was unsettling. On a regular evening, hearing there's someone nearby with a crossbow is enough to make anyone nervous. We were all on edge. We stayed tense all night, unable to sleep until the early morning hours. There were flashing blue lights everywhere, helicopters flying overhead, and sirens blaring nonstop. It was terrifying. This is a quiet residential neighborhood. Usually nothing much happens here except people going to and from work or running errands. This kind of chaos was completely unexpected. We never saw anyone around here carrying a crossbow, not even once. As news of the killings spread from Bushey to the national media, many people were shocked. The tragedy hit even harder when they found out the victims were related to a well-known public figure, John Hunt, a BBC racing commentator. Carlingford Locke and A.P. McCoy. You've probably heard those names before. John was working at a horse racing event miles away when the tragedy happened to his wife and daughters. The last message he got was from Louise's phone at 5:52 p.m., asking, "What time will you be home?" John replied that he would be late because the Saturday races were starting later than usual. He then sent a message asking, "Is everything okay, sweetheart?" It wasn't until later that John would discover this last text wasn't actually sent by his youngest daughter. It was the killer pretending to be her. The family was loved by many in the community and known for being very close-knit. Both daughters in their 20s still lived at home and often took family trips together. They had also built successful careers. Hannah was a skilled beautician who started working at a local anti-aging clinic before starting her own business. She was in a long-term relationship with a man named Alex Klein. Louise ran a small dog grooming business called Groom and Glow from a pod in the family's backyard. Friends shared their shock and sadness, but also spoke warmly about who Louise, Hannah, and Carol were as people. "One of the kindest people I've ever known," one friend said, "always smiling, positive, and hardworking. She was truly a sweet soul, just a wonderful person. I still can't believe this happened. Like I said, it's something straight out of a nightmare. She was one of the kindest, sweetest people you could ever meet. Truly a beautiful soul. In the hours and days after the murders, tension grew, not just in Bushey, but all across London. Police officers armed with firearms were sent out in search teams to specific spots around the city. Their goal was to find the killer, who was still believed to be armed with a crossbow. Even though the suspect had already fled before emergency crews arrived, the police knew exactly who they were after. It appears that Hannah, who had just come home during the attack, managed to send a text to her boyfriend Alex before she was shot. Even after being injured, she found her mother's phone and was able to tell the 999 operator that there was a man inside the house. In her message, she wrote, "Call police immediately." Her message continued, "To mine. Now Kyle here. Police now. He's tying us up." When speaking to the operator, Hannah said, "My sister's ex-boyfriend came in and shot us." The man she was talking about was Kyle Clifford, Louise's recent ex-boyfriend. Kyle, 26, was one of 3 siblings raised in Enfield, North London. The early search for Kyle centered around this area. Police raided his family home and conducted thorough searches. They also checked his brother's previous address in Enfield, but didn't find him there. Helicopters and drones were deployed to help with the search, while the public was urged to be on the lookout for Kyle. However, Hertfordshire police warned everyone to keep their distance if they saw him. Crossbows are surprisingly accurate even from far away. Our main goal today is to protect public safety and locate Kyle Clifford, who is wanted in connection with the murder of 3 women in what we believe was a targeted attack. We have deployed extensive police resources across multiple locations in North London and the Bushey area of Hertfordshire. The manhunt includes armed officers and specialist search teams working quickly in response to this horrific incident, which involved a crossbow, though other weapons may also have been used. If members of the public see Kyle Clifford, they are urged not to approach him under any circumstances and to call 999 immediately. News stations provided live coverage of the ongoing search. Then on July 10th, reports surfaced that Kyle had been spotted at Lavender Hill Cemetery near his home in Enfield. Armed officers swiftly surrounded the cemetery from all directions. They located Kyle there, and by the time they reached him, he had fired one final crossbow bolt. This time, Kyle was the target. He was rushed to the hospital where, over the following 10 weeks, he received life-saving treatment. Although Kyle Clifford eventually recovered from the single shot he sustained, the injury left him paralyzed from the chest down. Kyle was not completely unknown to law enforcement before being named the alleged crossbow killer. His family had a history of violent crime. Kyle's brother, Bradley Clifford, was serving time in prison for murder. In 2017, at the age of 23, Bradley chased down 2 teenagers after they had struck the wing mirror of his high-performance Ford Mustang EcoBoost with a bottle. The collision threw both teens into the air, and one was fatally beaten by Bradley while lying on the ground. The other teen miraculously escaped with only minor injuries. Bradley was sentenced to 23 years in prison. Kyle was evidently close to his older brother, visiting him frequently in prison, something that never sat well with Louise. She saw Kyle's unwillingness to acknowledge the brutality of Bradley's crime as reflective of his character, citing this along with other behaviors as reasons to distance herself from him. When Kyle's name was made public, others who knew him began to speak out. This included comrades from his brief time in the Army. A fellow trainee who went through basic training with Kyle in 2019 recalled that even then, he was immature for his age and carried a chip on his shoulder. According to this trainee, Kyle struggled to grasp basic military concepts, but managed to just meet the minimum standard to pass training. After joining Her Majesty's Army in 2019, he remained in service for just over 2 years. During that time, he spent 286 days at home, citing an undisclosed illness. When he finally quit in 2022, his commanding officer remarked that Kyle's character was wholly unsuited to military service, noting he showed no care or concern beyond himself. After leaving the Army, Kyle sought work as a fire and security systems installer at a fire safety company based in St. Albans. He left that role to become a security guard, but was fired from that position shortly before the murders took place. The official reason for Kyle's dismissal has not been publicly disclosed, though rumors suggest that his misogynistic comments about female coworkers may have contributed. Despite this, Kyle presented himself well to peers and employers and appeared to make a genuine effort to win over Louise Hunt. The two met on Bumble in December 2022, and over the following 18 months, they were in a serious and seemingly committed relationship. Unbeknownst to Louise during this time, Kyle was also involved in romantic relationships with two other women he had met through his previous jobs. The Hunts reportedly welcomed Kyle with open arms, but secretly friends said no one in the family approved of Louise's choice of partner. They described him as arrogant and odd. Nonetheless, Kyle was included in family vacations and gatherings. Kyle spent several days with the Hunts, celebrating Christmas 2023 at their family home. The breakup occurred in late June, shortly after the couple attended a wedding for a member of Kyle's family in the north of England. After hours of travel for the event, Kyle brazenly boasted to Louise, right in front of other guests, that he had slept with some of the attendees. She later wrote to Kyle that she found his treatment belittling and embarrassing, and that she wanted to end their relationship. In messages later retrieved by investigators, a clear pattern of manipulation attempts by Kyle began to emerge. After Louise expressed her discontent with the relationship, Kyle initially responded with defiance. He angrily pushed back, claiming she was always painting him as the bad guy. When she refused to back down, he shifted to feigned indifference. If she didn't like the way he acted or who he was as a person, Kyle shrugged it off, saying it was her loss. When that tactic failed to win her back, he resorted to begging, insisting he couldn't imagine life without her. He believed she would be his future wife and promised he'd do anything for her. But after a year and a half of what friends described as a controlling and unhealthy relationship, Louise stood firm and ended it. "I'm sorry, Kyle, but I can't keep going with what we have. I feel like it's broken, and I can't ignore how I've been feeling, or how I've been made to feel, over the past year. Right now, I owe it to myself to take some space and walk away for the sake of my own sanity and health. I never want there to be any bitterness between us, ever. Please take care of yourself, always." Kyle eventually replied with a message that must have given Louise some comfort. "Thank you for the clarity, Louise. Now we can both begin our healing process. I love you so much, and I will for a very long time. I'll always be here if you ever need me. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I wish you all the best. Take care of yourself, too." Louise followed through on what she had said. She kept her distance from Kyle and reminded herself that ending the relationship was the right choice. Just days after the breakup, she made a note on her phone, a personal reminder of why she had decided to walk away. "Would you like me to keep going?" She had typed a note to herself, something to hold on to whenever she felt tempted to miss him. It read, "When you feel low, remember this. His brother is in jail. He visits him regularly and has never once admitted how terrible his crime was." She had also written more reminders to herself, reasons not to go back. His family, she noted, was chaotic. There were racist remarks, hateful comments about transgender people, and constant road rage. He often put her down and once claimed he was smarter than everyone in her family. He used to talk about the violent things his brother and father had done, almost proudly. When she visited their home, he'd laugh at how uncomfortable it made her feel. While Louise tried to focus on healing and building a better life, Kyle headed in a darker direction. Just 4 days after the breakup, he started searching online for information about crossbows. He began checking out websites that sold crossbows. Just a few days later, he bought one, a Horizon Cornet MXT 405 compound crossbow, along with 6 bolts and a rope cocking tool from a site called Tactical Archery. He also ordered a CO 2-powered Glock-style air pistol, but didn't stick around long enough to actually receive it. Kyle didn't wait for the air pistol to arrive. He had already made up his mind to go through with the killings. His online activity clearly showed that he was planning the attack in the days leading up to it, even while appearing to live life as usual. In fact, right in the middle of a workout at the gym, he stopped to order a large 10-inch butchering knife, priced at 89 pounds. Kyle also went to B&Q, a home and hardware store, where he bought several rolls of duct tape. He planned to use them to tie up Louise. At a different store, he looked at different types of rope, considering which one to get. Kyle also stopped at a Halford store and bought 2 cans of petrol. People thought he might have intended to burn down the house to cover his tracks, but in the end, he didn't go through with it. Despite all the planning he was doing for the murders, Kyle still made time to visit a garden center with his family. At 10 a.m. on July 9th, Kyle took a trip to the garden center, just hours before loading a knife and crossbow into his car and heading to the Hunt family home in Bushy. His actions were cold and methodical. He had plenty of chances to change course, but from the very beginning, he stuck to a plan, one that involved tricking his way into the house. Just after 1 p.m., Kyle left his home in Enfield, carrying a crossbow and a knife tucked in his backpack. Before heading to the Hunt family house in Bushy, he looked up the horse racing schedule, likely to check that Louise's father, John, would be at work and not home. Once he was sure John wouldn't be there, Kyle knocked on the door and told Carol he wanted to return some of Louise's belongings. Clients kept coming and going through the back gate, completely unaware of what was happening inside. After killing Carol, Kyle was seen going back to his car to get the crossbow, which he then hid under a white sheet. It wasn't until after 4 p.m. that Louise came back inside from the garden, only to find Kyle waiting for her. Investigators believe that during this time, Louise was tied up with duct tape on her wrists and ankles. She and Kyle were alone in the house for about 3 hours. During that period, there was activity on Louise's phone. Her messages were read, her Instagram account was checked, and Kyle also did some online searches. Kyle searched online, "If I unplug my smoke detector, will it go off?" This showed he was having second thoughts about setting the house on fire. Just before 6 p.m., he sent a message to John, Louise's father, asking when he'd be back. Once he confirmed that John would be home late, Kyle decided to stay and wait. Kyle knew Hannah, Louise's sister, would be back from work around 7 p.m. He had already decided she would be one of his targets. According to audio evidence from inside the house, Louise was shot and killed with a crossbow just before Hannah arrived. When Hannah walked through the door, she could be heard saying, "What's wrong with you?" followed quickly by the sound of her screaming. At 6:55 p.m., Kyle was seen on surveillance footage walking away from the house and heading toward his car. Despite being seriously wounded, Hannah had been able to call emergency services just 2 minutes later. When Kyle was finally interviewed by police, they already had a full picture of what had happened. Investigators had gathered security camera footage, phone records, doorbell audio, and even written notes Kyle had stored on his device. When investigators showed Kyle the evidence, he had little to say. He offered only a brief apology, saying, "Sorry," and admitted, "What I did was terrible." For every other question, he simply responded with, "No comment." Investigators pressed him with questions. "Do you admit that this was a planned killing of 3 people, based on all the evidence?" Kyle didn't respond. "Did you carefully prepare this attack ever since the breakup?" Again, he stayed silent. "Was it after she sent that text in late June that you started planning to kill her?" Kyle gave the same reply every time. No comment. Investigators found a message on Kyle's phone, a letter he had written to his family. It was split into sections, each meant for a different relative. The overall tone? It was drenched in self-pity, as if he wanted sympathy rather than to take responsibility. It was obvious Kyle saw himself as the one who had been wronged. He wrote, "Please don't think of this as me throwing my life away. I've lived, and I'm thankful for everyone and everything that's been part of it." He went on to say it was his time to go and that he was finally choosing peace. Kyle said he knew his family would have many questions, that they might blame themselves or wish they'd done something differently. But he insisted none of them had failed him, and that there was nothing anyone could have done to stop what was coming. Kyle ended the letter by saying, "This is my choice, to finally be at peace. You all need to take care of each other. Talk to each other. That's what's best for you. I love you all very much." Then during the police interview, an officer asked, "Kyle, are you okay to come out now? When you wrote that note, had you already planned to kill Louise, Carol, and Hannah?" The officer pointed to a line in the letter. "You said, 'prevent this.' What did you mean? Were you talking about the murders?" Reading his letter aloud was the only moment Kyle showed any sign of emotion during the entire interview. In the end, Kyle Clifford admitted to the murders. He pleaded guilty to killing Carol, Louise, and Hannah. He also admitted to having dangerous weapons, the knife and the crossbow. But there was one charge he wouldn't accept. The Crown said that on the day of the murders, Kyle raped Louise Hunt. He denied this. Using DNA evidence, the prosecution said the rape happened during the 3 hours when Louise was tied up in the house. Even though the evidence against him was strong, Kyle still chose to go to trial over this charge. He admitted to everything else, but not this. No one could understand why he would deny just this one thing. Some believe that Kyle's refusal was his last attempt to hold on to control over what was happening to him. The trial started in early March 2025. Kyle chose not to show up for the court sessions. During the trial, medical experts explained the DNA evidence to the jury. The defense argued that the DNA linked to Kyle was from about 2 weeks earlier, when he and Louise were still together and had a consensual relationship. The prosecutor then asked forensic scientist Martin Whitaker if the intimate samples taken from Louise could still be explained by an encounter 16 days before. The scientist told the jury that explanation didn't make sense. He said the evidence matched something that happened 1 or 2 days before, not as far back as 16 days. After just 45 minutes of discussion, the jury found Kyle Clifford guilty. You first took the life of Carol, her mother, who had shown you only kindness even on that day, right before you attacked her. Then you raped and killed Louise, who had tried to end things with you as gently as possible, after your pride and anger became too much for her to handle. Finally, you murdered Hannah Hunt, who hadn't done anything to hurt you, other than stand by her younger sister. The evidence shows you are a jealous man, full of self-pity, and someone who treats women with complete disrespect. Kyle was given 3 whole life sentences for the murders, plus 30 years for the other crimes. He will never be released from prison. John Hunt gave a powerful and emotional statement as a victim. He spoke about his grief and anger. To the man who brutally murdered his wife and 2 daughters, he said, "Just remember one thing, no matter what misery you face, on the day you die, you will find no release." "I can still hear the screams of hell," John Hunt said. "When they roll out the red carpet for you, your miserable fate will last forever." And that was the tragic case of Carol, Hannah, and Louise Hunt.